There are brokers in the US that want to keep that relationship with the retailer, their relationship, not the manufacturer. Sometimes some brokers feel that manufacturers will step all over themselves or make mistakes or enrage a buyer to where the reflection comes back on the broker. I'm not that way. I want to have that relationship. I want that buyer to know who I am. All the entrepreneurs and people that I work with, I want to take them in on a meeting because no one can sell a product better than the person that created it. And that's the majority of the brands that we work with are entrepreneurial and emerging brands. So you're talking about somebody that's really put the sweat equity into it and they can tell their story better than any. There are stories where, this person had this and became this and cost them hardly nothing. But the majority of the time, it costs a lot of money. In the US, only 2% of new introductions last more than 5 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the new edition of Live Satviko Talks. Today we would be talking about how can food distribution business be made more profitable in the current times. We have seen many distribution leaders are facing a difficult conundrum, especially since the pandemic. The changing demand for organic, fair trade, or locally sourced products, as well as the changing food industry regulations, are putting a lot of strain on the food and beverage distribution companies. Well, when a business actually gets the products onto the store shelves and into these shopping carts of the consumers, the revenue potential can be staggering. Of course, convincing the retailers to stock such products for the brand requires a considerable amount of time, skill, and effort. And this is where the food brokers and industry experts come into play. They can be viewed as agents or talent scouts for the grocery industry. Today, we have Jeff Clark from Tempo Sales and Marketing. He has over 41 years of grocery industry experience from retail to broker to manufacturer to consultant. He has seen all sides of the industry. He has worked with brands such as Tasty Bite, Good Earth Tea, Tetley, Organic India, Naughty Snacks, and many more. He has also worked with distributors such as KeHE, Lapari, UNFI, and now he has finally started off his family business along with his son Ethan for working with the emerging brands to help them navigate the world of distribution using the brokers and distributors. So thank you so much, Jeff, for joining in. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the conversation.
Right. So I would first post in my question to you today. Well, the best, talking about food brokers again, the best food brokers, they have connections that they have naturally built up over the years with the retailers and the distributors. So now in their network of connections, they have the capability to move higher volumes of the product. So I would like to know, Jeff, what is the importance of associating with a broker for a brand?
Well, I guess, one of the main things to look at is, food brokers have people in different regions of the country and they represent many brands. So their presence at a retailer's establishment or at a corporate office is continual because they might be here for snacks. They might be there next week for cereal, the next week for dairy, but they get to know all the category managers. They tend to live where all those category managers live. They might even coach their child in baseball or soccer, go to church with them, be affiliated in civic organizations. So they have a really tight relationship with that retailer. My job and Tempo Sales and Marketing, we search out the correct brokers that have those relationships, the ones that are entrenched in these retailers, so that we have the best opportunity of succeeding. And that's really the most important to me is that relationship. So when we take on a brand, we look at the brand, we look at the different brokers because we work with many brokers across the country, and we say, okay, who has the best relationship in dairy, or who has the best relationship in non-food, and those are the brokers we assign those products to. We don't just give the same broker all of our products because some brokers are just not good at some things where they're good at others.
Yeah. All right. I think connecting or understanding, that is where your experience comes into play, where you have already known so many people in the trade and
Yep.
know who's the right guy for the right retail to crack that, and who's suitable for the brand.
Correct.
Yeah. So in continuation, it has been a challenge for the brands that having someone else selling your product isn't always the same as selling it yourself. So from the brand owner's perspective, this is one challenge which we see that at times working with a broker may mean giving up that personal touch that comes with presenting the products yourself. So how do brands can actually work with the brokers and the consultants to sort this and fit this alignment?
Well, there's two different avenues with that. There are brokers in the U.S. that want to keep that relationship with the retailer, their relationship, not the manufacturer. Sometimes some brokers feel that manufacturers will step all over themselves or make mistakes or enrage a buyer to where the reflection comes back on the broker. I'm not that way. I want to have that relationship. I want that buyer to know who I am. All the entrepreneurs and people that I work with, I want to take them in on a meeting because no one can sell a product better than the person that created it. And that's the majority of the brands that we work with are entrepreneurial and emerging brands. So you're talking about somebody that's really put the sweat equity into it, and they can tell their story better than anything. So I always feel like an owner or a president of a company, if I can take them into a meeting, by God, I'm taking them in. And I want to make sure that that buyer knows who I am, not just my broker.
Yeah. So
because keep in mind, we manage brokers. We're not brokers. We're like contract VP of sales.
Right. True. And also, while some of the brands which are based overseas and they want to enter a new market, it often becomes a challenge when they also want to understand the territory and they also need to have that faith to actually go into the market and create that balance. They have a compelling story, but now also it is very difficult for brands or the key stakeholders of the brand to actually travel everywhere on immediate basis. That's where they would need such kind of people who can actually become their spokesperson.
That's true. We work currently with a brand in Canada. We've worked in the past with one from Italy. We work with a brand from China. We just signed on a brand from Japan. And the brand in Japan does a huge amount of business in Japan, but not so much in the US. And a lot of it is understanding that US market. So, that's where we're the conduit between someone who doesn't understand how to do business in the US and getting them to the broker and to the distributor and to the retailer, because there's a lot that gets lost in that connection. So we marry the two together and make sure that both sides understand each other. And that's one of the special things that we're very good at.
Right. Right. Coming on to my next question. This is, a bit deviating from the brokers and just getting deeper into how, we are talking about making the food distribution business profitable. So, when distribution companies provide sales representatives with actionable pricing and sales guidance to determine what the customers they could call, what products they should pitch, and what prices they quote to achieve the most profitable outcomes. So how do the distributors work with these sales representatives and provide them this kind of guidance? If you can throw some light on that.
Well, are you speaking of food service or of grocery specialty natural?
I'm talking about grocery specialty.
Okay, so the first thing, and a lot of times we catch companies that have already gone to a distributor or to someone who's been selling to Whole Foods out of the back of their car, and they say, well, look, it cost me $2 to make it. I sell it to them for $3 and they sell it for $4. It's great. But what they don't understand is that when you go through a distributor, there's a whole lot of other charges that come into play because there's a lot of different cogs that distributor is going to do for you that they have to pay for. So
Right.
you have to make sure going in that you have all of those ancillary costs built into your cost so that you can be profitable. Because if you're not profitable, you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't hate to send each order knowing you're going to lose money.
Yeah.
And you will ultimately fail. So you have to make sure that you have all of that built in. Now, once it gets to the distributor, distributors have different relationships with different retailers. Like with Whole Foods, UNFI and KeHE both have an 8% markup. That's their deal. Now, they make their money off of manufacturers charging them for different things. That's their model, and we all know it. But now then you have other distributors like Associated Buyers. They charge a little bit more. They don't take as much from the manufacturer. They're wonderful to work with. I find all distributors easy to work with because I understand them. I know what they're going to ask of me. And so I have to make sure that whatever brand I'm giving them, that we have enough built into the cogs that the manufacturer is not going to go underwater. That's where you hear the horror stories about, X distributor broke me. Well, they didn't break you. No is always an answer. And if you go in and you give them a price knowing that you have that much margin, you have nothing to do business with.
Yeah.
Back when Tazo Tea was its own brand, that was during the time I was selling Good Earth and Tetley. Tazo retailed on the shelf for like $3.99. Cost was like $12 a case. Well, Kraft Foods bought them and immediately raised the cost to $17. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, they're going to go out of business. Well, what they did was they bought it back down with programs. So they were playing with the distributor's money.
Right.
And not losing. So that does work. I'd much rather, you say the term play loosely, but I'd rather play with their money than my money. So if I build it into my cogs, it's all good. So that's the very first thing, to make sure that that manufacturer has that built in. Now, like with the distributor having different things with different retailers, some they have 12%, some they do cross docking and it's 15%, some is 26% because it's full service. So you have to understand the relationship with this distributor, with this retailer, and where your retail is going to be. And if your competition is coming from the same distributor, because most retailers have 2 or 3 or 4 distributors that bring them different things. So if they have a relationship with a distributor at 8% and they buy your competition from them, but yet you're going in there through a distributor that charges them 26%, you're already underwater.
True.
But you can't tell that distributor what their model is. So you have to make sure that you understand all of it, because you don't just go in to go in. You want to make sure you're going in competitively.
Right. So I think that's a very valid point, and this also increases the complexity for the brands.
Yes.
There are a lot of variables involved. One at the distributor point and also at the retail point. So how does a brand actually get into this, or should the brand actually get into the nitty-gritty of it?
I'm sorry, say the last part again.
Should the brand really get into the nitty-gritty of it, or is it the distributor and the retailer they actually handle it at their own?
No, keep in mind that distributor has 50,000 items. you know, you're not going to be at the top of the bag. It's your job to sell your product. It's your broker's job to sell your product. Those distributors, they are wonderful people. They will help you, but they can't work for you. They have to work for their company. Their company sells a lot of products. You just have to make sure you stay relevant and in front of them. Make
Right.
relationships with them, because regardless, it is a money business, but it's also a relationship business.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure that you're continually building those relationships and participating in their programs, their trade shows. They do regional spotlights. They do all kinds of things. Last Friday, I was on a national Albertsons KeHE team meeting with all the KeHE people that service Albertsons Safeway with one of my brands. It was a wonderful experience. It's those type things that help you stand out, because it's not like it was 20 years ago where these distributors had sales reps. Now they have account managers, because the majority of them are not full service anymore.
Okay.
They're drop ship or they're consolidated. So you don't have retail reps from distributors going into a lot of the stores.
Right. Right. So, I mean, how does this work for a growing brand who really does not have much of the clue here, and how do they operate on this model? How do they get into this depot?
How does say that again? You broke up.
How does this work for a growing brand, a really brand with a fantastic product portfolio, but really does not have that that approach to go in, just like an established brand, or does not have those marketing dollars to spend in and get that velocity? So how do they actually work with these distributors? So do they actually search for a distributor who could actually get on the ground and build a brand ground up for them, or do they actually really approach those big distributors directly? How do they do that?
Well, it doesn't work that way anymore. There was a time long ago where distributors would help you build a brand. Now, UNFI and KeHE both have incubator programs, but you still got to have somebody wanting your product. A lot of people in the industry say distributors are truck drivers. Ultimately, they're truck drivers. It's up to me to have someone to want my product for that distributor to put it in. I mean, I've worked with brands where you beg and beg and beg a distributor to put you in, and finally they might put you in and you struggle. But then I have brands that, like Publix wants them. You'd be surprised at how quickly you get into a distributor, or Whole Foods. One thing that distributors say now is, bring me 30 stores, we'll put you in. So, it's like the cart before the horse kind of thing. We'd love to have you in, but you got to have a home first. Yeah. So that's really the whole thing. But it's almost impossible for a brand to make it without marketing dollars of some sort, because every retailer is going to ask for at least 4 promotions a year.
Right.
Every retailer, with the exception of a couple, you have to pay placement fees. And most of the time, placement fees through a distributor, because most of the distributors have it built into their policies and procedures, where if you participate in their expansion programs, that there's an algorithm for every time a new store gets sent one of your products, you automatically get billed for it, even if that retailer does not require free placement. And that tends to be your cost to them times 1.32. So they upcharge you 32% for that free fill. A lot of manufacturers don't understand that till they actually get the deduction. Then they're like, I had no idea. So those are the things that we educate on. Case pack, same thing. Yeah. Well, we're pack 12 because it makes sense. Well, if you pack 6, you're only going to pay half the slotting. So, I urge people to go down on their case pack to 6. Right. Because if someone wants a free case, well, I'd much rather give them a free case of 6 than a free case of 12.
True. Right. Talking about, in the retail space, there are often a lot of cross-selling opportunities, which, which seems to be a quickest way to boost revenues. Understanding the customer's purchase history and, what they are buying, what they aren't, how does this cross-selling offer to the customer an effective strategy to build the revenues for the brand?
Well, here in the US, we have spins and ROI, Nielsen data that you can purchase. And purchasing that data has become, I don't want to say easier, but more creative. For the longest time, only Unilever and Kellogg's and companies like that could really afford to buy the data because it was very expensive. But now I know Spins has made associations with food brokers to where the brokers can actually buy that information. They can't give me the raw data, but they can take an image or a snapshot of that data and put it in a presentation. So we still actually get access to the data without having to buy it because our broker has bought it. So the broker uses that. And we talk about it, they'll say, hey, well, look, brand X is doing this in this category. You're doing this. We have to find a way to overcome, that. So it's still where we have access to the data, just not in a raw format where we can manipulate it. That's really the number one thing now. And also what you're going to do to improve that buyer's category profit. Most buyers or category managers not only get a salary, but their bonus is based on their category profit.
Right.
And that's at retail and at distributor level. So if you've got an item that's going to increase their category profit, even though you might not be the top seller, they look at you favorably because you know what? They're going to make my number one brand spend more money to make my category more profitable.
Right. Okay.
Is that the answer you were looking for?
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. And so, coming on to this is my second last question to you. This is more around, we have a lot of viewers who are budding entrepreneurs and businesses who are building the brands in the international market. And they are also eyeing at the US market because the big consumer economy, and that is where the dollar is. So what advice do you have for the growing brands who wish to enter the US market?
Well, first, you have to have that import person here. You have to have a warehouse. You can't just ship a container over here. Distributors are not buying containers unless you have a huge amount of distribution. You have to make sure that you have someone here in the States that understands what you're going after, but can also understand you and your needs. You have to make sure that whatever you're coming over here with, that you're going to be competitive on the US shelf.
Yeah.
And I always tell emerging brands and entrepreneurs, if you don't have $1 million to give away, don't come here. because it will cost you a lot. It costs a lot for a brand to make it. Listen, there are stories where, this person had this and became this and cost them hardly nothing. But the majority of the time, it costs a lot of money. In the US, only 2% of new introductions last more than 5 years.
Oh, okay. And the reason could be because they do not have those marketing dollars to spend.
It's several things. You don't have the marketing dollars, you don't have the capital, and you don't have the management. You might have an idea, you might have a great product, but if you mismanage it, just like you see some of these brands that take on venture capitalists, but if they don't have the infrastructure to manage all that business that they're getting, and if they're just focused on getting more business and not taking care of that legacy business, then ultimately they fail. And all that money the VC spent is gone. So you have to make sure that you're taking care of the business that you're building, as well as what you've already built. I worked with a couple of venture capitalists on a couple of brands, and that's ultimately what I tell them is we got to make sure we take care of what we get, as we're still getting more, or it'll all fail.
All right. Right. So, as to my last question for the interview, now that we have Ethan also on the call, Ethan, it would be nice to see you as well if you can turn on the camera. Uh, hey, Ethan. Good to see you.
How's it going?
You're mute though. Hey. So, great interacting with Jeff, and a lot to learn every time I speak to him. And just now that you guys have started Tempo Sales and Marketing, and you, Ethan, you have just joined in with your father and building this up. I also wanted to hear out your short-term and long-term goals together. What do you guys plan to do with the Tempo Sales?
Go ahead, Ethan.
So we kind of came into it together, taking both of our experiences in the industry. I started with my father back in 2010, kind of learning the industry. He took me under his wing, taught me everything that I needed to know to be in a certain capacity. And several years ago, I kind of went out on my own and went to work for brokerages. I worked with 3 over the past few years. And then when we decided to come back together and form Tempo, we really wanted to marry those 2 ideas. My father, his legacy concept, where he's been in this industry for a long time. And for me, coming in with a creative mindset, a fresher mindset, one that hasn't been in the industry for 30 years, but 10 now, and just seeing it from a 30-year-old standpoint versus a 60-year-old standpoint, and taking those 2 good concepts and coming together and making something really, truly great, and kind of becoming like an all-encompassing sales team together. And I think that the bond that he and I share as father and son can translate into generating more sales as well, just because we do work so well together. Our long-term goal is to grow brands and to grow our brand working with other brands. I think we'd love to grow the company and expand into more opportunities and take on more brands and see how much damage we can cause. It's a really exciting thing that he and I have started, and so far we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback.
Yeah, well, I'm sure a lot of brands would learn and have a lot of key takeaways from this interview. And I would thank you so much once again for your time today. And I look forward to have more interactions with you guys.
All right. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you again.
Right. Thank you so much. Have a good day ahead.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.